I'd like to now invite onto the stage Mr. Anurag Behar, Chief Sustainability Officer, Wipro, to come on stage and welcome the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, please extend a warm welcome to Mr. Anurag Behar.
Okay. And if we really go by the, perhaps the elementary principles of sustainability, maybe I should switch off the mic because the mic might be using some electricity which is coming from a coal-fired plant. Is it not? Yeah? Okay. So welcome. You know, I just wanted to point out that it's a pleasure that all of us are here together. All of you are here with us from across the country. But what I wanted to point out was that there were about 3,000 schools and colleges which registered for this earthian program. 800 of them sent, I think, really thought through, really worked upon papers, 800 of them. So we don't have many of our friends and many of our colleagues who we would like to have. I would really like to start by thanking them and really giving this entire set who participated a big round of applause. You know, over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to introduce you, not that it necessarily needs any introduction to those students who have participated, but I am going to introduce you to the earthian program, not in a way that you've seen of it, but how did Wipro arrive at this program? And what's the purpose? And let me begin with a very personal narrative, a very personal narrative. I am, by education, a finance guy, right? I worked all my life, all my career in finance. And I was in business as well, running a business. And I was one of those people who ran away from science, although I'm an engineer. You know, so some of you might be wanting to run away from the science, physical sciences, but I did run away. I did engineering, but at the end of engineering, I said, this is not for me. I somehow drifted into this, and let me get out as fast as I can. So the finance guy that I was, the career business person that I was, at a certain point in time, what started haunting me, started with a small question, but subsequently started haunting me, is that all the stuff that I read about the environment and the ecology, is this really true? Is this genuinely a problem, or the scale of the problem that people tend to talk about? Is this really there? My experience in business had taught me that, you know, whatever you want to understand and discover, you have got to do it yourself. You have to understand it yourself. You cannot trust the understanding that you can get out of merely reading something in the newspaper or in a magazine and so on and so forth. So there was a period of time that I went around talking to people, studying things. I started reading Nature, right? Have you guys, any one of you has read Nature? How many of you? Only one. And it really tells you what kind of a thing nature is. Dr. Baba, as I'm sure, you know, he reads a lot more complicated things than Nature. But this Nature is, I mean, the most respected science journal, science research journal, and it's the hardest thing to read that I had ever read. And this finance guy, having spent his life in business trying to read Nature and trying to meet scientists and talk to them about this whole issue of environment and ecology, it was not easy for me. But nevertheless, and I remember Dr. Baba was one of the earlier persons that I met. He came into my office one day. I didn't know who he was. He didn't know who I was. And we met, and certainly he had an early role in trying to in shaping my thinking about this whole thing. At some point in time, I got so enamored by this whole notion that yes, indeed, there seems to be something there, that I started corresponding, talking with my colleagues at Wipro, and certainly with Mr. Premji. And what I had thought I had discovered was that people like us who are in business, who are cut off perhaps from the environment, while they do not understand what the issues are, and we tend to see everything from the eyes of the general media or from the eyes of general publications or the general people that we meet, there's a truth there there's a seriousness of the issue which we do not appreciate. And that's what I had started believing. And I remember the 6 months of discussion amongst the Wipro team and this continuing dialogue between Mr. Premji and me. And Mr. Premji did his own work. You know, he would go around the world meeting his colleagues in business, meeting all kinds of people that you read about in the newspapers, from statesmen to business people. And I think he would ask them the same question all the time, that is this issue of environment and ecology as serious as it is made out to be? And I remember one morning at the old Bangalore airport, you know, I think this is 2005 or 2006, maybe middle of 2006, I would guess. At 5:30, I was catching an early morning flight, and I got a mail from him saying that, well, I think this is really serious, this issue of environment and ecology, and let's do something about it. And that is when the journey of Wipro started, to become an environmentally conscious and environmentally active citizen of the world. And we said we'll do two things. Because, you know, if you believe that the environmental issues are big issues, ecological issues are big issues, you just can't believe in them and not do anything about it. You better do something about it. So we started doing two kinds of things. The first one was that Wipro must become more environmentally, ecologically sustainable. We must figure out how do we fix our greenhouse gas footprint, how do we use our water more responsibly, and so on and so forth. And the second, we must contribute as much as possible to the society around us to try and make ourselves, and this time I'm using ourselves as in our society. And when I say our society, I do not mean India. Globally, how do we contribute whatever we can such that society becomes more sustainable? So we started that long journey at that point in time. But we started that long journey because we dwelled deep, and we started genuinely believing, and which we believe today even more so, that if you look at the next 25, 30, 40, 50 odd years, 100 years, perhaps no set of issues are going to be more important for humanity than the issues of environment and ecology. And unfortunately, it's not as though at this moment, we as in humanity, give it adequate importance. But we believe that this is perhaps the most important thing over the next 50 or 100 years. And which is why we made up our mind that we'll do something about it. And that's how we came to this issue of environment and ecology, in part, which is why all of you are here. But there's another story. And that story is that of how did Wipro get into education? And when I say Wipro got into education, I don't mean that Wipro's got into education in the sense of a business. We have no business around education. But we have been involved. Many issues, all of us, wherever you look, there are social issues around. But we very quickly narrowed down to one specific aspect, and that was that if we look at our education, whether school education, informal education, university education, we have a serious challenge. We have a very serious challenge. And the challenge is of many dimensions. There's an issue of access to education. Kids do not necessarily have access to school. And if they are in schools, the schools are not necessarily focused on what we would call education. And what we call education is genuine learning, genuine understanding, a conceptual basis to learning. The ability to learn. Learning to learn is education, not cramming. And that's just the cognitive aspect, it's just the thinking aspect. Education is not education unless education takes into account the development of a child, of a student, of ourselves, not just on the thinking cognitive dimensions, but also on social dimensions. Do we relate to each other? Can we be friends? How do we live with people around us? Do we contribute to society? It's not just a social and cognitive dimension, it's also the emotional and ethical dimensions. Do we live our life based on a certain set of values? Or are we just drifting? So the Wipro notion of education, and that is not an exclusive domain of Wipro, pretty much the consensus of what good education is. And most of you here, teachers, professors, and students certainly would share that what we would call good education is not something that we necessarily see in this country, in the schools and in the colleges. And 11 years ago, we started working that, however small an organization you might be, in the context of the largeness of this country, the vastness of the education system, let's contribute in our small way to improving the quality of education in this country. And we've been on that journey for the past 11 years. We've done many things. Along the way also what happened about 10, 11 years ago that Mr. Premji formed the Azim Premji Foundation, which essentially works with the government education system, and it works at a very large scale. And Wipro kept working, of course, I would say in simple terms, more on the urban side. But when in 2007, 2008, when we had taken few steps in the environmental journey, and now I'm threading these two things together, and we had done 8 years of work, 9 years of work on the education side, we started thinking, where does this connect? The environmental journey and the education journey. And it was very simple. Very, very, very simple. Which is that eventually the fate of this planet, the fate, the destiny of humanity does lie with all of you. All these kids who are in school, all of you who are in school, or in the universities. You are the citizens today, but you are going to be the most important citizens tomorrow. You will be in leadership positions. Perhaps some of you will be founding and running companies which are more successful, much more successful than Wipro. You will be in politics, in business, in sports, but you are the people who will actually affect this earth than people like me. And therefore, we started thinking, can we not connect and develop something, a program which actually deeply works with schools and colleges, and over a period of time, and remember, nothing happens overnight. Nothing happens in a year. I mean, this is just the beginning. I hope that we'll all be around 10, 15 years later when we have the 15th such occasion. But we put these two threads together and we said, let's involve and engage with schools and colleges, and let's do it through this platform which is called the Earthians. And that is how all of you are here. And we hope that this thing, which today was, with 800 colleges and universities, it grows dramatically. I must point out one specific issue that we have dealt with, agonized with, which is this, that the Earthian program, with this intent of combining the issue of environment, ecology on one hand, and education, the young citizens of our country, all this together. The issue that we have dealt with is how do we take this notion, this sensibility, this program out to schools and colleges which are outside the big cities. This program has still, if you were to ask me, our big anguish about the program this year is that we are thrilled that so many people have participated. We are stunned by the quality of response. Some of the papers that have been written, and they'll all be on the website, you can read them for yourself. Outstanding, outstanding thought, very practical. But what we are anguished by is that even then, the program is limited to the big cities. The Bangalores and the Delhis and the Madurais and the Indores of the world. We have not been able to take it to the smaller places. And I think if you ask me, our vision is that over the next few years, we should be able to take it to a larger and larger crowd, a more inclusive set of schools and colleges. With that hope, and again, with my thanks, thank you so much. You've got a busy day ahead, right? And I guess a number of you are here not to receive the award, but to listen to Ruskin Bond. Okay? And we'll have all that. Thank you once more. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.